Welcome to the Armed and Trained podcast, man. I'm excited. My name is Ahadi. I'm the founder and CEO of Armed and Trained. And I think it's a perfect time to start this podcast. The reason why, it's just so much going on. And as a Second Amendment or 2A community member, I think it's very important for responsible gun owners to make sure that we all on the same page. Now, if you don't know, a lot of the laws, they change each and every day. Laws change every year, every few years. And I just want to be able to provide you a space where you can ask safe questions. You can be in a safe space, not being judged, not come around people that feel like you should know all of these things. And I want to create a safe community where we can just talk about any and everything that's 2A related. The goal is not only to talk about fitness, but also firearms. So firearms and fitness go hand in hand. You'll hear about my journey when it comes to fitness, because I'm excited about that too. Like, just as excited I am about Armed and Trained and getting everyone their concealed carry license so they can carry in 40 plus states, it's just as important to that fitness lifestyle that I adopted over the last year. I always want to start off with the origin. You know, me, I grew up in DC, Southwest DC to be exact. When you see that National Stadium, it haven't always been like that. You know, going through having a daughter, like an older daughter at the time, I'm like, you know, I want to get my license so I can protect her. You know, that's the reality of it is I wanted to be able to protect her. I wanted to be able to be in a position that if anything was to happen, you know, that is there. You know, so that was my reason. You gonna have your reason. You know, it's cool, whatever your reason it may be. But that was my reason. I went to the class. Now, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. The class itself, I didn't know what to expect, but I just felt like this class was like different. So I went to the class. I ended up paying for this multi-package, which was DC, Maryland, Utah, Virginia. So Utah covers 38 of the states, but it does not cover DC or Maryland. DC or Maryland does not honor any other permit. That's still today. So that was the package. I paid $575 for it. Yeah, $575 at the time when I was getting my license. So we go to class. I meet the trainer at Small Arms. Again, I'm not going to say no names or anything like that. I go to Small Arms. I lie to you not, the class is about 45 minutes. The class is about 45 minutes. I go, we in there, we learn about like proper stance, proper grip. In the parking lot though, we not in the classroom. This is the parking lot, right? We go in there in the parking lot doing dominant eye tests. We up there like this, trying to, you know, figure out what your dominant eye, everything I do in class now, we in the parking lot, you know. Once we go over the basics like that, we go straight into the range. You go into the range, you shoot a couple of rounds, you come back out, you get your paperwork, right? Now, when you get your paperwork, you really don't know what to do. Now, Utah is the only one that pretty much give you directions on how to send their paperwork, but everything else you had to pretty much figure out on your own. So that's what I did. So I end up going to get my DC, Maryland, and my Utah. My Utah came back quick. Utah always come back quick, within 30 days. My Maryland at the time was really interesting because when I submitted it, I had to submit like a reason for me to be able to carry in Maryland. And at the time, I had a business, you know, so my business was going to be Armed and Trained, right? So I had to create my business. I created my business all while I'm a third grade special education teacher in DC. I create my LLC, Armed and Trained, which you see today, and I had to submit bank statements or invoices saying that I create cash or do business in Maryland. I submitted that to Maryland. By the grace of God, my license came back and I was approved, but I was like, they had to give them all this stuff. And I'm like, that's kind of crazy, but it is what it is. So I did that. So now I got my Utah and I got my Maryland, but I do not have my DC. So with DC, because I was living in DC at the time, you have to purchase your firearm first. So my instructor at the time sold me a Glock 21, which is a 45 caliber, which I had no business actually having. It just didn't make sense to me. it didn't make sense at all as a beginner to have a 45 caliber. But anywho, I get that, it get transferred down to DC. I go there, I put home defense and concealed carry, right? So once I do that, they called me back a couple of weeks. I had to come down there and do some paperwork, and then I got called back down there, so I had to bring my backpack down so I can have the lockbox and I could just, leave with it. But then I got an email later on saying that my home defense was approved, but my concealed carry was denied. And I was just wondering, like, I didn't have any felonies, I didn't have anything like that. And if I had anything, it had to be juvenile. So I'm upset because I'm like, yo, it's nothing on my record that is making me get to that point where I'm getting denied, where I got to prove everywhere else. So long story short, I ended up just finding a program that does expungements for free in DC, which they still have. And I ended up getting that license expunged. But that wasn't until years later, So it was some time where I didn't have my DC permit, and I was living in DC. That was so frustrating to me. You know what I'm saying? So like, I ended up moving to Virginia and everything changed. But like at that time in DC, it was just so bad. They were just denying people left and right. So it was a lot. But as we learn later and later, you can't be discouraged with the first decisions, because a lot of times people don't understand the concept. If it was juvenile, if it was a use act or anything like that. So I tell people all the time, when you get denied, you have to appeal. They're going to tell you why you got denied, and you need to just go ahead and appeal it. So moving on from there, after I got on my license, I'm thinking like, okay, how do I want to pretty much introduce armed and trained? Why do you want to teach concealed carry? Because I'm telling my family, especially my family, like, why would you want to do that? Nobody's going to pay for that. That's what I heard. Like, that's one of those things that, like, why don't you just stick to being, third grade education teacher? That'll be easier. That'll be safer. You got money coming in, guaranteed, So as I go through my growth of the business, I'm trying to figure out how to stand out, because I'm gonna be honest with y'all, a lot of the old heads, a lot of the older instructors was gatekeeping so bad. They was gatekeeping so bad. So what I did was I started reaching out to my instructor, because he had an apprentice program. That's what he called it, where if you bring students to him, then you get half of the cut. So that $575 they paying, you get half of that, he get half of that. Now, at the time, I'm like, well, I don't have any instructor credentials, outside of me just being a Maryland instructor. So what do I do? So he was like, I got some people in the NRA that you could take their class. You got to do the class for a certain amount of days. And also with the USCCA, you can do the instructor program. I got a guy for that. So I go through all that. I spend at least $2,000-$3,000 in total with everything. Like, a lot more expensive than now, especially as a training counselor myself. A lot more expensive. But I go through the program, I get everything done. So I'm certified in Maryland now. I had to fly to Utah to become a Utah instructor. So I got that, but I still don't have DC. So moving forward, I'm like, I still don't have DC, but I want to offer DC because that's where most of my people are at. So I work out something with him. It's like, okay, man, you'll be able to, we can work out a partnership. I'll train them, long as you get them signed up, and we can work from there. And we did that for a good while. And it was good until you start realizing, like, yo, I'm bringing in all these people. I'm doing all this work, and I'm only getting 50% of the cut. Now, when I was younger, I'm like, man, that's not fair. But I get it as a business owner. Like, you use the credentials, you're doing this, you got space, no overhead space, all of that stuff. Now I get it. But back then I didn't, so... I sat right there, I said, okay, now, as I go further and further, I'm like, but how do I branch off? How do I start getting my stuff, separating myself from them? So the first thing I did was I thought outside of the box. I really thought outside of the box. So one thing I did when I thought outside of the box, I was like, what is popping right now in the city? And the number one thing that was popping right now in the city was the DC comedians, right? All of the DC comedians, I'm like, I gotta tap in with them. They got a strong market. They got a strong fan base. And they funny as hell. So like, I'm like, how do I do this? So I go, Fat Marco, A-Pop, Goofy, like all these folks, like I'm like, I don't know them, you know, but how can I tap in with them to, you know, get my business out there? You know, how can we barter that? So what I did was this outside thinking like, yo, I'm gonna offer y'all the license for free in exchange. I just need y'all to promote the business. Like, cause a lot of times people look at it and they think like, you know, everything gotta be transaction when it don't. So I do that. I make sure they straight. They make sure I'm straight. We like pushing. And honestly, COVID hit. When COVID hit, that's when I'm like, yeah, what we gonna do? So at that point, everybody just thinking the world is about to just be cooked, and it was, you know. So I'm like, what am I gonna do? So even during COVID, I hit $10,000 in 1 week, and I'm like, yo, I can't do this nowhere else. I can't do this nowhere else. Like, how can I duplicate everything that's going on? So then I started to see really like have these battles with myself trying to figure out if I still want to be a teacher. I'm like, yo, I do not want to give up on the kids. I don't want to do that. But then I started thinking about our people need a different type of teaching. You know, adults need some different type of teaching. They need situational awareness. They need conflict avoidance. Like, they need these things too, not just students, not just kids. So I just went all in, man. I put my resignation letter in, and I'm like, man, I'm never gonna be able to come back. Like, so that's something that I had to settle with. But I bet on myself, and like, you know, 8 years later, we here and we feeling good. We in a good space, multiple locations, you know, good revenue coming in, all of that good stuff. But it was that chance, that moment where like I really had to decide like what I wanted to do. So at that time, I got my businesses. I don't have no space. I don't have anything. So what I did was, at the time, was I pretty much created like a hybrid course. So at that time during COVID, you was able to do online courses. So I would make them do an online course, and then I would have them meet me at the range. They go to the range, they shoot, they get their paperwork, they're good. I explain everything, boom. And that worked for like 2 or 3 years. And then, you know, things changed a little bit. DC required more in-person. Same with Utah. Maryland, they still hybrid, like depending on, you could do online classes, you know, but I found out real early that people do not pay attention to online classes. So it's convenient, but it's not necessarily impactful. So ended up changing that whole thing. And I started just working out of my building. You know, out of my building, we had a conference room, and I tapped in with that. You know, then I started messing around with different partnerships. A few people that I partnered with that helped on so many levels. And from that partnership, I established the academy with my brother Lou, who we still work together now. But again, part of this whole thing was finding the best option for you. You know, whatever business you in, you got to find the best situation for you. It may be solo, it may not be solo. You know, so I want you to like figure out what works for you, because this is real time. As a business owner, you got to figure out stuff in real time. You can't sit right there. You can't wait. You can't think about what might work. You got to go. You got to take risks at the end of the day. So to bring you all the way back up to speed right now in 2026, like we got the 2 locations. We're doing classes every other weekend in different locations. And it's all thanks to you guys. All thanks to everyone that's tapping in, you know, that's recommending people, that's pretty much coming back for their renewals. Like, everything just plays a major role when we look at Armed and Trained. You know, without you guys, it wouldn't be no Armed and Trained. Without you guys, I wouldn't be able to provide education. I wouldn't be able to provide a platform like this when it comes to the podcast, because it's not about the money. Like, it's not about sponsors. It's not about none of that when it comes to this pod. It's just me speaking law to you. You know, and you asking questions that I can answer here that we might not have time for in class. You know, we always cover the basics in class, but to have something like this, you know, where you can rewind, you can ask questions, you can submit answers, all of these things play a major role. And like, I'm super excited to get this thing going. All right. Now, I also want to talk about the fitness side of it. You know, I think like, I do understand that a lot of times people look at firearms in a bad way, but That's just like with anything else, alcohol, drugs, like everything is looked in a bad way depending on how you use it or how it's being used. You know, I think as a responsible gun owner, like you have to continue to educate yourself. I think that is very important. You know, that's one of the highlights that we want to have here on the pod, because I think that people need to be able to have access to information, and this is going to be so important. So my goal is to tap in with you guys. My goal is to be able to answer any question you may have. My goal is to connect with you. Connect with you, all right? Outside of class, you know. Hopefully, you know, we can get some followers. We can get some questions being asked. We can get a community built, you know, in this field. But again, like, to be responsible, you got to have education. You have to have knowledge. All of these things come hand to hand. And hopefully, you know, we tap in and then we grow this community together. All right. So all you need to do, go ahead and like, go ahead and subscribe, you know, do that favor for us so we can tap in and we can keep it moving.